Welcome back to the channel. This is Punched. Well, on the table we still have Grognard Simulation's title of Armored Knights, Guderian crosses the Meuse. So we are continuing on with the game. This is the recap of turn 9. So turn 9 is the midnight turn on 14 May 1940. So it's a night turn. And that's has some particular consequences we'll get into here in a moment. So we're looking at the layout. This is typically how I keep things on the table. I thought I would point that out. So we've got various kinds of marker counters over here. It does kind of wind up as a jumble when I get in the thick of things, but I cleaned up for purposes of this tour. Right below that is the area where I'm keeping track of the flown and not flown units, and also the fatigue levels. So in this game, as aircraft units are employed to do airstrikes, you accrue fatigue. So 1, 2, 3, and a maximum of 4 fatigue. By the rules of the Armored Knights system, you cannot fly an aircraft that acquires 3 fatigue or more. So typically what you're going to wind up with is you will wind up with a situation in which hopefully at the start of the game, if not the start of the day, all of your aircraft have very low fatigue, ideally 0 fatigue. You fly them, they accrue 1 fatigue. You fly them again, 2 fatigue, and you can fly them one more time for 3. So the maximum number of flights for an air unit, sorties for an air unit, is 3 sorties. Now, the Air Mission Success Table can assess additional fatigue. And per the rules, fatigue is something along the lines of, it's either aircrew fatigue, which is definitely a thing, but it's also accumulated maintenance issues, right? You have to have a certain amount of maintenance going on for the airframes and so on. So that's what we're talking about. It is also possible to actually take step losses, and we see, for example, here's one of the French units, the few French units, and this is flipped over to its back side. Note the white stripe here in the middle of the counter. This is the full strength, typically double, and this is taken actually a step loss. So step losses are a thing for aircraft units. All right, let's see, a few notes down here, quite a number of notes up here. This is my unresolved questions for the rules for some of the situations. Additional counters here, and of course we have the map, and we have the casualty box and turn track over here. Got my nice handy-dandy calculator. So, surprisingly, most combat in the Armored Knights game system does not require a calculator. You can do it in your head, but those are for relatively straightforward things where you just simply count up the counters and maybe do 1 multiplication. That would be about it. But when you start talking about stacking on things like hasty attack is 0.75 of the combat value, that's not always so easy to do in your head. So the calculator does help, particularly if you get a little bit tired. All right, so that's the layout of the map board. I have items over here off screen, which I will bring on screen. So here's my combat results table. I typically keep that going. I've got a little 3D printed template here that allows me to easily scan over and find out what's going on for a particular combat. And then for looking at potential combats, I have another template, just a 3D printed piece of plastic that allows me to say, oh, okay, well, I have a veteran unit and these are my die rolls. There are no modifiers. And so when I'm looking at a 1-to-1 attack, I have an 80% chance of doing some good or bad, depending on your point of view. because I can see exactly what we're looking at. It helps me focus. So 90% at 1.5 to 1, and I know that at 2 to 1, with no die roll modifiers, a veteran unit will always have some effect upon the enemy. So it's really easy to throw this up here and move it around. I keep the rule book available for reference. I'm still having to refer back to it more than I would like. Still learning the rules system, but that's fine. This is my first game in quite a long time. First game for this particular version of Guderian crosses the Meuse, and for the new rules under Armored Knights. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. This is the end of turn 9. As I said before, it's the midnight turn. Not a whole lot's going on. It's a night turn. So for night turns, you have an additional 0.5 multiplier on all combat strengths. In other words, your units are half strength. So neither unit is particularly interested in engaging. Neither side has air cover, and the particular plans for this turn were the French were withdrawing to the other side of the north-south canal, the Ardennes Canal, and they have, for the most part, succeeded in doing so. There is a bit of a lost battalion situation going on right here. These leg infantry have been pretty much caught up by the Germans. So we have Germans to the left, Germans to the right, and we have an interesting situation arising the next turn. Things are looking grim for these soldiers. Okay, so the other effect on night turns is that all movement costs are multiplied by 2. So your movement is basically half. Just as your strength is half, your movement is half. The interesting exception to that is not on roads. You can move normally on roads at night. You can conduct a night motor march, and it's just fine. And as you can see, the German units are generally laid out along the road network. One thing I will point out that I might not have mentioned before is there is no zone of control exerted. This game has zones of control, and that's significant. It's significant for movement. They are not sticky zones of control, so that's useful to know. But they do impose movement point, additional movement point penalties if you wish to go, say, from one zone of control hex to another one. Now you can come entirely out of the zone of control, go back into another zone of control. There is no penalty. You just simply make the move. However, across a water feature such as the Meuse River or the Ardennes Canal, a major river, it turns out that you do not exert a zone of control. And we have a lot of roads in this area that wind their way parallel to the river, or to the canal for that matter. So we have a lot of movement going on from the Germans. The French have, as I said, they've mostly withdrawn across the canal. Practically every unit on the French side was in movement, so we have no hedgehog building that requires stationary units for the entire turn. For the Germans, they have made very good use of their bridge up here in the north and have moved the entirety of 1st Panzer Division. They've moved the entirety of the Grossdeutschland regiment across as well, and all of the 19th Panzer Corps corps troops. They've all come across that bridge. Okay, I should point out that in the 0400 turn upcoming, we're going to have this ferry will convert over to a bridge, and so we should immediately get all of 2nd, is that 2nd? Yes, that is. All of 2nd Panzer should come across and be in this sector. That was their intention. We do have a couple of early vanguard units, if you will, that have come across, one here and one here. This ferry will take an additional couple of turns, but it should be fully converted over to a pontoon bridge by the start of the 0800 turn, at which point 10th Panzer will come across. As the German units have moved in proximity, the French have been busy blowing bridges. So they've blown the bridges here, here, and here. They failed their role here. That could be interesting. It is possible to it may very well be possible to take the bridge by main force. That has interesting implications, which we'll get into should that happen. And there's one bridge left down here that the French did not try to blow up. According to the rules, you have to wait until an enemy unit is within 4 hexes or so. Okay, the Germans advance. We talked about the bridges. Let's see, item 5 on the agenda. Item 6, the French have withdrawn. You note the congestion in here. There's quite a considerable amount of congestion in this area because of the road network. This is still fairly heavily wooded terrain. It's not quite like the Ardennes, which is massively wooded. And realistically, the only travel you'll get is along the roads. There is at least some flexibility here, but we see that units have considerably stacked up. This has caused a situation in which there is not a whole lot of combat power in this sector along the Ardennes Canal. There's certainly some, but not as much as I would want. So additionally, we don't have a whole lot going on down here. I think that's part of me knowing the plans on both sides. I don't really intend to force crossings down here as the German. So perhaps that's wrong of me to kind of optimize the French to take advantage of that knowledge. But for the most part, I can say, okay, German units up here, French units up here. So it seems to be a wash. Right. Bridge counters. This is an interesting thing. The game comes with bridge counters. Let's show you. This is a blown up bridge. This is a functional bridge. So I've been using them. Typically, I use them as the situation requires. So every road, for example, right here, let's see if I can zoom in just a wee bit. Why not Remily? Every road that crosses a river has a bridge. Okay. Now, I will point out that at this point, all of the bridges across the Meuse River, including this one, have been blown. So that's just sort of an understanding that I have. I think that's a reasonable ground rule to say the bridges are up, the bridges are down. When it becomes important to the game to know the state of a bridge, a particular one, then I put the counters in. So interesting thing, as these bridges are now blown, I'm considering just taking the counters off. So for example, let's take all the blown bridge counters. It strikes me that they're not terribly necessary. I think it's more interesting to know where the bridges are not blown, and that is accurately represented here on the map by the up bridge counters. So we'll go with that. Okay, coming up, we have the what's called the start of day interphase turn. So in the start of day interphase, we're going to do a certain amount of housekeeping. We're going to have some fun over here with recovering fatigue for all of the aircraft. And aircraft are typically going to average somewhere between 2 and 3 fatigue. I haven't run the numbers exactly. They may be able to shed up to 4 fatigue, but it's a die roll. I don't know if that's visible. So let's try this. There we go. They may be able to shed 4 fatigue and come all the way back to 0, but that's not terribly likely. So if you've pushed your aircraft very hard on one day, you may not be fully functional the next day. And it's sort of a diminishing returns situation. So we'll look at that. We'll look at recovery of medical and maintenance casualties that will come off of the lost boxes. There are rules for that. We're going to reset. Okay, shaky can coming up. We're going to reset all the casualty counters back to 0. We'll advance the turn, of course, and I think there may be 1 or 2 other housekeeping things that we'll do. One thing I will point out is we are also going to assess supply and communication traces. Communication is not really an issue in this particular game, but I can tell you that we're probably going to we may very well get into an out of supply situation with one of these units. These ferry counters allow 4 stacking points of units to be in supply. So I think that we have more. There are 2 ferries in this hex, And I think that we have more than just 8 stacking points of 10th Panzer units. So we'll wind up with a situation like that. It's not too critical. It's not as if the French are in a position to make a counterattack in this area in this particular turn. And we should have the ferries up. As soon as the ferries get up, the out of supply situation should resolve. So that's just something to be aware of. All right. So start of day interphase. I'll do a video on that. I think it's not the most interesting thing. It's not nearly as gripping as combat and maneuver, but still it is an important part of the gameplay. I'll do a shout out for the upcoming Armored Knights Case Blue Don Bend game, and also the Case Blue Stalingrad game that's going to be in playtest at Consim World Expo in July. Supply is much more of a problem for the Germans in that particular case. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those rules play out. Okay, one other thing I'll mention is I will probably do an upcoming play aid video. There are a couple of spreadsheets that I use from time to time, and an approach to using those spreadsheets, as well as the particular 3D printed items that I have here on the table. So these are kind of experimental in nature. I'm not. Some of these I use more than others, and we'll just see how that works out. Okay, that's it. End of turn 9, midnight turn, 14 May 1940, Battle of Sedan. The game system is Guderian, Grognard simulations. Armored Knights, Guderian crosses the Meuse. Hope you liked the video. Of course, hit the like button if you did. And if you like what I'm doing in general, feel free to subscribe. And we will see you down the road.